Thank you for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have the best channel, the number one channel, the number one source for Tupac content out on YouTube, bar none. I have my special guest, Jesse Surratt, also known as JMIX, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, JMIX, and go ahead and let you plug anything before we get started on this interview.
Yeah, I guess if I was to plug anything, I would just have people who are interested in Tupac check out some of the interviews with some of the people I did on JMIX Death Row channel or JMIX Jesse Surratt Productions. And I encourage everybody to do their own research. The platform is just about spreading information from people that knew Pac and people that are working the case. So that's the platform, and that's all we really want people to do is learn more about Tupac.
All right. Well, thank you, JMix, for that. I certainly appreciate you being here tonight and doing this interview with me. It's been a long time in the running, and got a whole lot of questions for you tonight, and hopefully we can get some of these questions answered. I know that there's been some questions that have been answered already, so it may just be redundant at some point, but I think for the most part we have an interesting show tonight. So I'm going to start off with just general basic knowledge of who you are as far as how you got started doing this Tupac thing, what piqued your interest, and just how it all got started.
I used to run a website called TupacNation.net, and what it was a forum board where people went to talk about Tupac. One of the threads was a question about remixing, and I guess I was kind of early on to the social media thing, but people were, they were guessing between each other, who remixed this song, and they were trying to guess samples. And my idea was, why don't we just ask the people? And the replies they're hard to get to, and I'm like, well, it couldn't hurt just to ask them. So what I did is I just started sending out social media friend requests and just started asking people, hey, I'm from Tupac Nation. We had some questions for you about your work with Tupac, and my mom told me a long time ago, you would be surprised what you get is all you got to do is ask, and that's kind of how it worked with the interviews. So back in 2012, I just asked a bunch of people if they wanted to do interviews, and the ball kind of got rolling from there. This channel morphed into something that I didn't expect it to, but it all started out just trying to find out about Tupac and trying to talk to his engineers and see what different songs were and when they were recorded.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So you said that you were actually were you the moderator? Were you the creator of the Tupac Nation? Is it still available to these days, or is it now defunct?
It's now defunct. I came on pretty late in the scene, I guess, and I was made a moderator, and then I was made an admin. And the person that owned the website was just unavailable. Couldn't get a hold of the guy. And when it came time to renew the license, nobody could get a hold of him, and he's the only guy with the keys. So the website went down, but the YouTube channel remains.
Okay. So now you were talking about that you were started off doing that, and then you started getting into interviews. Tell me how easy or how hard it was to actually get some of the people that you actually interviewed, and at the same time, can you tell me exactly? You could actually name off a few of the people that you've interviewed and tell us your most difficult one to get and your easiest one to get.
Well, I started off. I reached out to Kathy Scott. Kathy Scott was one of the first people I interviewed. Anytime that someone was promoting a book or a new revision, those are pretty easy. Greg Kading was a pretty easy get. I guess the hardest person it was to lock down an interview was Spice One. Spice One is a really, really cool dude, but it's kind of like me and you a little bit over the course of years, though. It took about 4 years of back and forth with Spice One to actually get him on the phone because there was always some kind of scheduling conflict. Another funny story is Jerry Heller. I had been talking back and forth with Jerry Heller's publicist. I'm trying to remember her name, it's slipping me. But I was talking to his publicist, and actually, Jerry Heller, I was supposed to land Jerry Heller's interview the day that he had a heart attack in his car.
Wow.
So that's probably, I guess, that'd be the hardest one because I never got him. And I'm working on Tretch right now. It's just, He's another one I've been working on for a few years. That's just kind of tough to land.
Yeah, you mentioned Spice One, and he actually had a really good song with Tupac. I think it was on America's. Was it most? I can't even think of the name of it, but it was the one of the albums. He had a really good track with Tupac. I didn't actually hear the interview, but did he have anything really interesting to say about Tupac?
Yeah, he told a story about them that's kind of well known now about Hennessy and apple juice. And he told another story about them being too young to actually buy 40 ounces. So they would stand outside the store, and they're both at this point, Tupac's a rapper, Spice One's a rapper. And they would catch someone who recognized them, and they would have that person buy them beers. And one of the stories that Spice One told was him and Tupac are walking down the street drinking 40s after they had this situation happen. And a cop stopped him. And instead of citing him for it, he's like, if you can up in that 40 right now, I won't cite you for it. So it's Spice One and Tupac slamming a 40 so they don't get cited or arrested. And he was talking about how they were walking around messed up for the rest of the day and how the cop cut him a break because they chugged it. I always thought that that was quite entertaining.
Oh my God, you got me laughing over here. That's a pretty good story. Um, God, you got me. Yeah, I can't even concentrate over here. So when you speak of Craig Kading, and you said that you had got the interview, and I can't say that I've actually heard the interview, but you came out with the release of the unheard audio of you and him doing a debate with Antoine Beatty. Now, let me ask you this. At one point, you did mention that you lost connection, and you said that Greg actually, during the conversation, towards the tail end of the conversation, he flew out the handle. Do you want to speak on exactly what made him fly out the handle that you want to speak about, or you rather keep that under wraps?
No, that's fine. It's open book. We had set up an interview or a debate via Anton Beatty on Anton Beatty's channel. And it started out, me and Greg don't like each other. It's pretty evident. So it started out as for what people have heard. It was a pretty rough debate. We are going back and forth at each other. He had brought up my criminal history, and you can hear that early on in the released portion of the interview. And when he brought up my criminal history, I was waiting for him with his cop ties to bring up more. My Wi-Fi had cut out, and I recorded it via Skype. So Anton Beatty called me back, and he was like, if you continue to do this interview or this debate, I'm recording it on my end. I'll send you a copy. And I was kind of hesitant, but I was like, yeah, that's fine. So when we get back in the interview, Greg Kading, every time I would start to ask a question, he would kind of circle back to my criminal history. And from what I can remember of it, I believe when it started to go downhill is he brought up my mom. He had brought up my mom in a way to kind of paint me as coming from a criminal family because
Okay.
she had an arrest when she was younger, which is, I have no problem saying, it's inciting a riot. She got into a bar fight. And when he brought up my mom, things kind of deteriorated pretty quickly. And I think I called him a dirty cop, and we started yelling back and forth at each other. And at that point, whatever formal debate kind of collapsed into just a disaster. Needless to say, it didn't make me look very good, nor did it make Greg Kading look very good. And I think that is why Anton never gave me a copy of the rest of it, nor has he ever released it. So Anton Beatty is not a man of his word whatsoever.
So you don't have any contact with him, right? I think you mentioned that RG Bond has some kind of connection to him still.
Yes, RJ emails him sometimes, and right around the release of Battle for Compton, I guess that they had kind of patched up whatever disagreements they had. But no, I have no way to contact Anton Beatty. And like I said, and I'll put this out there for your channel as well, if Anton Beatty wants to release the rest of that debate, I will give him $1,000.
There you go, Antoine Biddy. This is your open invite to release that. And actually, you know what? Matter of factly, I'll throw 500 on top of that if he releases that portion of the unheard Greg Kading flying off the handle. I'll offer $500 on that, so that makes it $1,500. And in this economy, I'm sure that Antoine Beatty could use it, especially since he's a teacher. And no offense to teachers, but they really don't get paid a whole lot of money. So, well, and Venom Lives will throw 20. He says so. Anyhow, so you speak
Right
on
on.
you speak on Greg Kading, and when about? Because I know you interviewed him. When about did you start just kind of distancing yourself, or did you ever even believe in his theory, even at the beginning before you started listening or started hearing and started doing your own investigation on Tupac Shakur's murder?
Well, to be honest with you, when I interviewed Greg Kading for the first time, it was in 2012, I believe. I had just read his book when his book came out. It's 2012, 2013. I'd read his book and I thought, I'm like, wow, this has got a lot of information of it. And if this is true, this could tie up a lot of loose ends and, help convince people who are struggling with the Orlando Anderson situation, because of no arrest and how he was killed early. So I thought there was a lot of good information in the book, and I even told him so. Um, it kind of fell apart though a little bit afterwards because as soon as I interviewed Greg Kading, I was just moving on to the next interview, and I know that Tupac: The Early Years was supposed to come out, which is a project by Atron Gregory about Tupac's early life, and one of the directors and producers of that was R.J. Bond. So I interviewed R.J. Bond subsequently after Greg Kading. When that interview was posted, I got an email from Greg Kading, and it said, "This is your boy Bond." And what it was an internal affairs report that RJ had made with the LAPD saying that some of the information that was out already in murder rap was endangering certain witnesses' lives. But when he sent it to me and he said, "Your boy Bond," the first picture, when you get an email, it shows you a screenshot, was RJ Bond's unredacted address, all his information. And once I
Okay.
saw that, because I've had dealings with police in my life, I kind of took that as a subtle threat that I'm willing to, because to me, I didn't know RJ Bond. He was a film producer. And I took it if Greg Kading, just because this guy doesn't agree with your theory, is willing to dox you online, he wanted me to post this document.
Okay.
And once that happened, it made me very, very wary of Greg Kading. And it made me kind of start to dig on Greg Kading because I felt that that was a tactic, and I still believe that that was a tactic to kind of shut up RJ. And the more I dug into Greg Kading's background, the more nefarious I found all his activities to be.
Okay. Now, I remember during that conversation, actually, before on the interview you did with Greg Kading, before you lost connection, you had said that Wayman Anderson. You want to talk about Wayman Anderson. What were you alluding to exactly when you said that? When I think it had something to do with the Keefe D confession. Do you remember what that was
Yeah,
exactly?
well, I think that I was getting down to the point. A little background for those that don't know. Wayman Anderson was a confidential informant that LAPD would use, and he was listed by Steve Strong as one of their top confidential informants. This means that the information that Wayman Anderson was giving them would come back verified. It was good info. He was giving them good info the whole time. So during the debate, I tried to bring up Wayman Anderson because Greg had used some of Wayman Anderson's information while writing murder rap. Well, it come to find out, Wayman Anderson completely changed the story, and Wayman Anderson was pointing the finger at death row. So what I was trying to do in the debate was impeach the witness that he used because Wayman Anderson has since kind of changed his tune. So that's what I was trying to do was to catch him up on Wayman Anderson. That's why I brought him up. Now, for those that don't know, he was a rapper named Suave, and he is doing life in prison for a fire. And you'll notice about the confidential informants that are used by whether it be Bobby Ladd or Greg Kading, once they get enough information out of these people, And it's notable to say that Wayman Anderson was used to convict LAPD officers of wrongdoing. But once they used him for his information, they locked their confidential informants up on other charges. Wayman Anderson was locked up for a fire that eventually led to the deaths of two people. And Wayman Anderson's biggest complaint was, I gave you all this information, and you guys are now trying to bury me to where I can't talk anymore. So when I brought up Wayman Anderson to Greg Kading, I was trying to impeach his own witness. Because just like Eugene Deal has said, Greg Kading took Wayman Anderson out of context.
Do you want to talk about Michael Psycho Robinson? You want to add anything about him?
It's kind of it's out of my comfort zone to do so. I like to speak on people that I have enough information to make a confident answer on. I don't like to speculate. I like to speak right from my own well of knowledge, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can certainly appreciate that. Yeah, he just, to me, Greg Kading pretty much just danced around in that whole debate, so to speak. But if you really think about it, it really wasn't a structured debate, just because I think, as RJ Bonner said, it's probably the right idea if you want to do a real debate to probably go live, head to head, face to face on video, so that you're able to just have some true rebuttals for the other person's question, if you do have one, or lies, if it's that. So we'll move on from Wayman Anderson, and just to let you know about Wayman Anderson, I don't know if you knew this or not, but he had sent out a change.org. He had sent out a petition to try to get himself out of prison, for he feels like he's been falsely accused. And I know you said something about a fire, but did they have enough evidence to really secure a conviction on him to get life in prison?
It was pretty weak. I believe they found a business card outside the residence, or in the residence, that tied Wayman Anderson to the case. But in Wayman's own defense, he says that he was out of state and had the plane tickets to prove it. So the evidence they used to lock up Wayman Anderson was circumstantial and weak at best. Wayman Anderson is a very interesting case, if for those out there who want to go to the details of what's going on with him legally. It would appear to the layman even that it looks like that they want him in prison.
Okay, so we're gonna segue. Thank you for that. Anybody that wants to learn more about Wayman Anderson, go ahead and go out there and do your investigation. But we're gonna move on to the meat and potatoes of this conversation, and that was going to be regarding Battle of Compton. You were part producer of it with RJ Bond, and there was a few questions that I have, and there was a few questions that were sent to me about the actual movie, and wanted to ask you, what did you think about Controversy Radio's spin on pretty much on the elements of Battle of Compton?
Well, I like Jesse from Controversy Radio. I think that he did a deep delve into the little half dead Snoop beef. I don't want to ever be in a position where to criticize another person's work. Jesse goes into the blood sacrifice thing and that angle, which I don't follow that much. But I think that the information that he's putting out there about dates, times, and places is accurate. It's just it's a direction that I don't really follow, because it falls along the lines of your Illuminati types and your blood sacrifice type of thing. But I think for what it is and what he presented, that he did a good job at that.
Do you think Snoop Dogg has? Do you think he has a little bit more knowledge than what is portrayed out there? Do you think he knows a little bit more about actually took place and what happened?
Absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. The thing about Snoop is Snoop has told many different versions of the same story. I found that when people tell the truth, the story pretty much stays the same. A good way to catch someone lying about something is, does their story change? And I think over the years, even most fans can recognize that Snoop seems to tell different versions of the same story. The last time he saw Pac, or the parasailing story that he told at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction that nobody had ever heard of before. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm saying that Snoop seems to come across with an attitude when people ask him about Tupac, if anybody's ever noticed that. I think that Snoop kind of tries to distance himself from Tupac because I believe that deep down he's still insecure about, still even to this day, living in the shadow of Tupac at Death Row Records. Because everybody has to keep in mind, before Tupac came to Death Row Records, Snoop was the star. I believe that Suge even pulled Tupac to the side at one point and told him, you have to keep in mind, this is the house that Snoop built. Now, as for foreknowledge, I believe that Snoop, with the rift of DPG and the blood section of Death Row Records, I believe that there's a lot of people in that camp that had knowledge of that something was going to happen. If you notice, there was no members of DPG in Vegas that night. And if you look at clips, from Daz Dillinger saying we were on that F Death Row stuff for a while now, or don't mess this up, homie, most of the time, and most of the instances, you can see that the only person involved in the DPG camp that was in Vegas that night was Nate Dogg. And if you know anything about Nate Dogg didn't roll with any set. Nate Dogg was his own guy. He was a Marine and he stood by himself. But back to the foreknowledge question, or my statement of foreknowledge, I believe there was definite foreknowledge there. Maybe, and to be fair for those that are on the fence, it might not even be about Tupac's murder, but I definitely feel that there's enough circumstantial evidence to say that they knew something bad was going to happen that night in Vegas.
No, do you think the wheels were set in motion before that incident happened, where Snoop Dogg was actually on the plane when they were headed back to Vegas, or wherever they were headed back to, and the whole story with Little Half Dead talking about the Rolls Royces, and his explanation to how it all went down was kind of little shaky. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, you have Snoop on one hand saying they were here, and then you have him saying they were over here in another conversation he has. So do you think the wheels are set in motion before that incident, or do you think that incident that happened in that plane that day when Suge and wouldn't let Snoop Dogg's bodyguards get on the plane is what set the wheels in motion to have Tupac taken care of?
I don't think that's what set the wheels in motion, but I think that it did help exasperate it. I know that there's an incident that it's highly debated, but Chris Nassif came out, and he's an agent in Hollywood, and he said that Suge had told him that Tupac had slapped Snoop and threw him in the back of a SUV where the luggage was when they were flying out to a certain location. I think that the rift between Snoop and Tupac was a very old rift, going all the way back to 92, 93. And I don't think that it was the incident on the plane that set those wheels in motion. I believe that those wheels had been set in motion long before that. But if anything, that incident just served to show that Snoop what side he should fall on. And I'll tell you what, just my opinion alone, if the owner of the record label is pulling security off of me to threaten me, I'm going to be on my F Death Row stuff from that point on as well.
Do you think that you got me thinking here, JMIX, about this? Have you directly or indirectly, has Little Half Dead, has he made a statement that he'd be willing to do an interview with you, or does he not like you anymore because of the, I guess, allegations that have been directed at him with the whole Battle of Compton movie coming out?
Well, Donald Smith, his Christian name, he's been friends with me on Facebook for quite a while. I've reached out to him for an interview. So far, I've not gotten any answer back. So far as liking me, I'm not sure. Probably doesn't. But I've never talked to him. I've tried to reach out to him. I've tried to land interviews with Little Half Dead, but he's not interested in speaking with me.
It'd be very interesting if he was willing to take a polygraph test. I think if he did something like that, then he probably could exclude himself from it. But it seems like the people that have been accused of crimes, they don't want to do those kind of things. They don't want to take any kind of polygraph test, or Matter of factly, this is the way I see it. If you're innocent of a crime, why even worry about it? I mean, people accuse people of stuff all the time, but if it's not true, just kind of carry on with your day, I guess. So moving on to Las Vegas, the night of the fight, you have the individuals that were inside the car. So let me ask you this, because I hear different stories all the time, and one of the stories we hear was there was four individuals in the car, right, in Las Vegas that pulled up to Suge and Pac's BMW and shot in, of course, killed Tupac and grazed, or whatever you want to call it, to Suge Knight. Are you in agreement or disagreement that there was four people in that Cadillac that night?
That's a tough one. If you look at witness statements, it was Frank Alexander who said that he saw two for sure, and he thought there were more in the car. But not one of the witness statements, if you go from Edie to Frank to Gaddafi, not one of them can give an exact number of people that were in the car. I firmly believe, as I have for several years now, that Malcolm and Danny Patton were in that car. Was Little Halfdead in that car? I don't know. I don't have enough evidence to say that Little Halfdead was in that car. But I believe, just based on the initial police reports, that there were at least two, if not three people. The four people being in the car started becoming mainstream and popular with the Keith Davis confession, which came out in the murder rap book. But I don't see enough evidence to say positively that there was four people in the car. And
Okay,
my mix up of, or my opinion on who was in that car might differ from other people's.
gotcha. Okay, I mean that kind of narrows things down. Now, don't you find it interesting that when they did the special with Ben Crump and that whole ordeal with what we've figured out to be at the end, big surprise that the the gun is found in the backyard by a dog or whatnot. But then you find it interesting that they didn't have Danny Patton or Malcolm Patton on the series.
Oh, I think it's pretty interesting. I'll give you some inside baseball. I know one of the producers of the series early on. Stephanie Fredericks was a producer of the series, and she kind of got pushed out by Lolita Files, who obviously had a dog in the fight because she had written Once Upon a Time in Compton, Bobby Ladd, and Tim Brennan's book. But to go back to that, I was told by Stephanie Fredericks that their showrunner Frank, they knew where the Pattons were, but Frank didn't want to go there. That they were scared to go to where the Pattons were. That they could have got that interview, but they did not want to go to the neighborhood. That's what I've been
Which
told.
which is in Lancaster, California.
I believe so. I'm not sure their exact address. I'm just relaying to you the information that I was given, that they were scared to go talk to those people. Now, I find it very interesting that I look at it two ways. They they could have used Greg Kading's footage, just like they used R.J. Bond's footage of Michael Moore and Frank Alexander in that show. They could have used Greg Kading's footage of Malcolm and Danny Patton. But I believe the Susan Constantine body language expert blowing them out of the water probably made A&E steer clear from Danny Patton because they knew that their witnesses had already been impeached. And with them dismissing, like if you saw on the show with the Kenner theory, they talk about to Randall Sullivan. They're just dismissing theories, and I think once it got down to the final three episodes, that they already had their agenda, that they were going to push the Tim Brennan Bobby Ladd story. So one of two things happened: either Frank, the showrunner, was really scared to go into the neighborhood to interview the Pattons, or they had never planned on airing that side of the story anyway. They were going to dismiss it right off.
Got it. Yeah, it seemed like it was the narrative was with this was that they were gonna just blame it on the book, or actually, the book was gonna be the holy grail of the case and slam shut. But speaking on that, and this is kind of trivial, and I'm just gonna jump into this real quick. Didn't Frank Alexander live in Lancaster, California?
When Frank Alexander died, he lived in Marietta, California.
Marietta, California. Okay, good deal.